These are 20 hidden facts about High Plains Drifter that most fans have never heard, even after 50 years of watching Clint Eastwood's haunting revenge western. A real-life murder in Queens, New York inspired one of cinema's most mysterious supernatural westerns, and John Wayne hated it so much he threw the script for a potential collaboration overboard during a sailing trip. April of 1973 brought High Plains Drifter to theaters, and the film changed everything audiences thought they knew about the western genre. Dark and disturbing, it refused to give us the heroic cowboy we expected, and behind the scenes the production overflowed with strange coincidences and deliberate choices that most viewers have never discovered. Whether you caught this film in theaters back in '73 or discovered it decades later on home video, you probably walked away with questions. Who exactly is the stranger, and is he a ghost or the marshal's brother? Why does he seem to know things only a dead man could know? Today we're going to pull back the curtain and reveal the secrets that have been hiding in plain sight for over half a century. Some of these facts will change how you watch the film, while others will give you a new appreciation for the craftsmanship involved. And at least one involves John Wayne getting so angry about this movie that he literally threw something into the ocean. Let's get started.
You are. You're an animal.
We are bringing that out.
Fact number 1. The film was inspired by a real murder in New York City. Here's something that will fundamentally change how you understand High Plains Drifter. The entire screenplay grew directly from the 1964 murder of a woman named Kitty Genovese in Queens, New York. If you remember the news from that era, this case probably stuck with you. Kitty Genovese was attacked outside her apartment building, and according to reports at the time, numerous witnesses failed to intervene or call for help. Psychologists would later call this the bystander effect, that phenomenon where people fail to act when they assume someone else will step in. Screenwriter Ernest Tidyman took that real-world tragedy and transplanted it to the Old West, and that's when the film's central moral failing comes into focus. The townspeople of Lago stood by and watched as Marshal Jim Duncan was publicly whipped to death. They did nothing. They looked away because getting involved felt too inconvenient or too dangerous. That's the Kitty Genovese story reimagined on the frontier. Once you watch High Plains Drifter with this knowledge, the entire film carries different weight. This isn't just a revenge western but an allegory about collective guilt and the price of moral cowardice. Every single person in that town is complicit in murder, and the stranger arrives to make them pay for their sin of inaction. Tidyman understood something crucial about the Genovese case. The most terrifying element wasn't the attacker but rather the neighbors who heard screams and did nothing, and that's exactly the horror he brought to Lago.
Into town. Now they'll never forget him.
Fact number 2. The screenwriter had just won an Oscar. Speaking of Ernest Tidyman, here's a detail that puts his involvement in perspective. When he wrote the screenplay for High Plains Drifter, the Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay had just gone to him. The French Connection earned him that Oscar in 1971, one of the most celebrated crime films ever produced. Tidyman was riding high, and had also created John Shaft, having written the novel that introduced that iconic character in 1970. But his background was anything but privileged. Cleveland in 1928 gave him his start, born to a father who worked as a crime reporter, and he dropped out of school at age 14. Everything he achieved in Hollywood came through raw talent and determination, which meant he was largely self-taught from that point forward. When this 9-page treatment for a supernatural western landed at Universal Pictures, Eastwood wasn't just getting a genre script. An Oscar-winning writer at the peak of his creative powers had delivered something special. A man who understood crime, understood moral complexity, and understood how to fill narrative gaps with black humor and allegory. Tidyman brought something else to the screenplay too. Sergio Leone's spaghetti westerns had heavily influenced his work, the same films that had made Eastwood a star, and that influence shows in every frame of the finished film. Fact number 3. This was Eastwood's first western as a director. Here's something that surprises people. By 1972, Clint Eastwood ranked among the biggest Western stars in the world, having done the Dollars trilogy with Leone and starred in Hang 'em High, Coogan's Bluff, Two Mules for Sister Sarah, and Joe Kidd. The man practically defined the modern Western anti-hero. But High Plains Drifter marked his first time directing a Western. Only his second film as a director overall. His first directorial effort had been Play Misty for Me in 1971, a psychological thriller rather than a Western at all. Stepping behind the camera for High Plains Drifter meant taking on a significant creative risk. That 9-page treatment arrived at Universal, and Eastwood saw something in it immediately, later describing his attraction to its offbeat quality. Rather than just star in it and let someone else direct, he approached the studio about handling both jobs himself. Universal agreed, and what emerged would establish themes that Eastwood would return to throughout his entire directorial career, namely sin, guilt, retribution, and the possibility of atonement. Film scholars now identify High Plains Drifter as the beginning of what they call the auteurist through-line of Eastwood's work, an Old Testament preoccupation with moral reckoning that runs through Unforgiven, Mystic River, $1 Million Baby, and beyond. Everything started here, with a first-time Western director who happened to also be the biggest Western star in the world. Fact number 4. Eastwood deliberately removed the explanation for who the stranger is. This is one of the most important hidden facts about High Plains Drifter, and it completely changes the debate about whether the stranger is a ghost. Ernest Tidyman's original screenplay had a clear solution to the mystery. Marshal Jim Duncan's brother was explicitly identified as the stranger. No supernatural being, no ghost, simply a relative seeking revenge for his brother's murder. Eastwood read that script and decided it was too tidy. He deliberately removed the brother reference because he wanted the audience to feel uncertain, and that ambiguity was the whole point. A 1980 interview captured his thinking when he explained that the only clue is when the drifter lies down and has this dream of the sheriff being whipped to death, and you know from there that he's tied in some way, but you're not sure how. That uncertainty was a conscious artistic choice. Eastwood later said he made it very ambiguous, so the audience can draw their own conclusions, asking whether this was some sort of mythical deal or some sort of apparition. The next time someone tells you definitively that the stranger is or isn't a ghost, remember this: Eastwood specifically crafted the film so that both interpretations would be valid, and the mystery is the point. Fact number 5. Foreign audiences saw a completely different version. Here's where things get really interesting. While Eastwood removed the brother explanation from the English language version, the foreign dubbed versions tell a different story entirely. The Italian, Spanish, French, and German dubbed versions of High Plains Drifter actually restored the brother explanation, which meant audiences in those countries were explicitly told that the stranger is Marshal Duncan's brother seeking revenge. For decades, European audiences have been watching a fundamentally different movie than American audiences because of this change. The supernatural ambiguity that makes the English version so haunting simply doesn't exist in those other versions. The mystery is solved, and the ghost theory is eliminated. If you ever wondered why debates about the stranger's identity can get so heated, this explains part of the reason. Depending on which version someone grew up watching, they might have an entirely different understanding of the film's central mystery. American audiences got Eastwood's preferred ambiguous cut. Everyone else got Tidyman's original explanation.
Give me that combination, Mark.
I would give you the combination to the gates of hell.
Fact number 6. Eastwood's stunt double was deliberately cast as the murder victim. This is the kind of detail that seems like a coincidence until you learn it was completely intentional. Buddy Van Horn had been Clint Eastwood's stunt double for years, and the two men looked remarkably similar, which is the whole point of having a stunt double. Same build, same features, close enough that audiences couldn't tell the difference during action sequences. When it came time to cast the role of Marshal Jim Duncan, the man who gets whipped to death in those haunting flashback sequences, Eastwood made a very deliberate choice and cast Buddy Van Horn. Think about what this means. Every time Marshal Duncan appears on screen, you're looking at someone who could pass for Clint Eastwood himself. The physical resemblance between the stranger and the dead Marshal wasn't accidental because it was built into the casting. This deliberate choice strengthens the supernatural interpretation of the film. If the stranger is Duncan's ghost returned for vengeance, then of course he would look exactly like the dead man, and the casting makes that reading not just possible but visually supported. Van Horn's involvement with Eastwood extended beyond this film. He served as an uncredited stunt coordinator on High Plains Drifter, and would eventually go on to direct 3 Eastwood films himself, but his appearance as Duncan remains one of the most meaningful creative choices in this production. Fact number 7. The entire town was built from scratch at Mono Lake. When Universal Pictures greenlit High Plains Drifter, they expected Eastwood to shoot on their studio backlot because it would have been cheaper and more convenient. Eastwood had other ideas. He personally scouted locations by driving a pickup truck through Oregon, Nevada, and California, looking for something specific, a landscape that felt otherworldly, almost purgatorial. Mono Lake delivered exactly that. Mono Lake sits in Mono County on the eastern side of the Sierra Nevada mountains, a 760,000-year-old soda lake with strongly alkaline water and an alien landscape of calcium carbonate formations called tufa towers. Lee Vining is the nearest town, Nothing about it looks like the typical Western movie location. That's exactly why Eastwood chose it. He described the location as highly photogenic, but that undersells what he was going for. The barren rocky terrain created a cold, eerie atmosphere that felt like purgatory itself, the perfect setting for a tale of damnation and revenge. But here's what makes this production special. No existing town stood at Mono Lake. The entire settlement of Lago had to be built from nothing. Fact number 8. The construction numbers are staggering. Let me give you the specifics on building the town of Lago because these numbers are genuinely impressive. 150,000 feet of timber went into the construction, and the production employed between 46 and 50 technicians plus 10 laborers. These crews worked 10 hours a day for 18 consecutive days. When they finished, they had constructed 14 complete houses, a 2-story hotel, and a church. And here's what makes this different from typical Hollywood construction. These weren't facades but complete 3-dimensional buildings that allowed interior scenes to be filmed on location, rather than on a soundstage. Think about the logistics involved. All that material had to be transported to a remote location on the eastern Sierra Nevada, and an entire functioning town went up in less than 3 weeks. Eastwood wanted to maintain the atmospheric consistency of shooting everything on location, and that demanded the extra effort. This wasn't typical Hollywood efficiency. A director with a specific vision made sure every element served that vision, regardless of what it required. Fact number 9. 380 gallons of red paint. One of the most memorable images in High Plains Drifter is the town of Lago painted entirely red, renamed Hell by the stranger as preparation for the outlaw's return. 380 gallons of red paint achieved this effect. Cast and crew initially started painting the buildings themselves before professionals came in to complete the job properly. The visual symbolism couldn't be more direct. Covering the town in red made the townspeople's guilt visible and transformed their comfortable denial into an undeniable statement. They allowed an innocent man to be murdered, and now they would face the consequences in a place that literally looks like hell. From a production standpoint, painting the buildings meant destroying the set they'd just spent 18 days building. Once those structures turned red, they couldn't be used for anything else, and the paint became a commitment, a permanent transformation that mirrored the moral transformation the screenplay demanded of Lago's citizens. Fact number 10. The Sergio Leone and Don Siegel tombstones. Sharp-eyed viewers have noticed something unusual in the graveyard scenes, where 2 of the tombstones bear the names Sergio Leone and Don Siegel. This wasn't a mistake or a random Easter egg, but Eastwood paying tribute to the 2 directors who most shaped his career. Sergio Leone directed the Dollars trilogy that made Eastwood an international star. A Fistful of Dollars for a Few Dollars More, and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly transformed Eastwood from a television actor on Rawhide into a global icon, and Leone's influence on High Plains Drifter shows throughout, from the mysterious stranger to the morally ambiguous violence to the operatic approach to Western storytelling. Don Siegel directed Eastwood in 5 films, including Coogan's Bluff, 2 Mules for Sister Sarah, The Beguiled, and most famously, Dirty Harry. Siegel taught Eastwood the efficiency and directness that would define his own directorial style. When Eastwood appeared on Inside the Actors Studio in 2003, he addressed these tombstones directly, saying he was having a little fun with those guys and wasn't wishing anything on them, just that you had to put some name on there. The tribute feels earned. Without Leone and Siegel, there's no High Plains Drifter, and Eastwood knew it, which is why he found a darkly humorous way to acknowledge his debts. Fact number 11. Mordecai was played by a Wizard of Oz munchkin. Billy Curtis, who plays the pivotal role of Mordecai, brought something extraordinary to the production. Standing 4 feet 2 inches tall, his career stretched back to Hollywood's golden age. 1939 saw Curtis appear in The Wizard of Oz as one of the Munchkins, and just a year earlier in 1938, he had starred in The Terror of Tiny Town, an all-dwarf western that remains one of the most unusual films ever produced. But Curtis wasn't just a curiosity from Hollywood's past. He was a serious actor who refused roles that demeaned little people, and he brought dignity to every performance. His work in High Plains Drifter proves it. Mordecai is arguably the most morally complex character in the film after the stranger himself. An outcast mocked by the townspeople, he's also the only person who shows the stranger genuine friendship, and at the end of the film, the stranger makes Mordecai both sheriff and mayor, a final act of subversive justice. Most importantly, Mordecai is present for the film's final revelation. He says, "I never did know your name," and here's the stranger's reply, "Yes, you do." Then the camera pans to Marshall Duncan's gravestone. 50 years in the business earned Billy Curtis that moment, and Eastwood gave him one of his best roles.
Darren, you hit?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Damn near tore my leg off.
Fact number 12. The cinematographer was called the Prince of Darkness. Bruce Surtees shot High Plains Drifter, and his nickname tells you everything about his approach to the material. Fellow cinematographers called him the Prince of Darkness because of his innovative use of low-key lighting. While other directors of photography flooded their sets with light, Surtees embraced shadows and found drama in what you couldn't quite see. For High Plains Drifter, Surtees developed a distinctive approach by shooting with unusually wide apertures so that, in his words, everything appears visually scorched by the light. The result is a film that feels bleached and harsh, like the landscape itself is punishing the characters. Surtees came from cinematography royalty. His father, Robert Surtees, won the Academy Award 3 times for Ben-Hur, The Graduate, and The Sting, and the younger Surtees carved out his own identity by going darker than his father ever had. The visual style of High Plains Drifter became a template for Eastwood's subsequent work. When people talk about the distinctive look of an Eastwood Western, they're largely talking about techniques that Surtees pioneered on this film. Fact number 13. The composer was a jazz musician Eastwood discovered at a nightclub. The haunting score for High Plains Drifter came from an unexpected source. Dee Barton was a jazz trombonist and drummer who had played with the Stan Kenton Orchestra, and Eastwood discovered him performing at a nightclub called Dante's in North Hollywood. Barton brought something unique to film scoring because his background in jazz gave him an improvisational approach, and he wasn't afraid to experiment. For High Plains Drifter, he created a score that blends early synthesizers, specifically a Moog performed by Paul Beaver, with female voices, guitars, and a full orchestra. The result is genuinely unsettling. The music doesn't comfort you or guide your emotions the way a traditional Western score would, because it creates unease and suggests something supernatural at work. It sounds like a nightmare. Barton himself considered it his best score, and it's easy to understand why. The music perfectly supports the film's ambiguity by refusing to tell you whether the stranger is a ghost or a man. It just makes you feel that something isn't quite right, and that feeling never goes away. Fact number 14. The production designer had won 2 Oscars. Henry Bumstead, known affectionately as Bummy, handled the art direction for High Plains Drifter, and his credentials were impeccable. Bumstead had won Academy Awards for To Kill a Mockingbird in 1962 and would win again for The Sting in 1973, the same year High Plains Drifter hit theaters. 4 films with Alfred Hitchcock had sharpened his understanding of how physical space affects storytelling. Bumstead met Eastwood on Joe Kidd in 1972, and what began there became a remarkable partnership. He would eventually work with Eastwood on 13 films, helping to define the visual language of Eastwood's directorial career. For High Plains Drifter, Bumstead faced a unique challenge. He had to design an entire town that would feel authentically Western, while also supporting the film's supernatural undertones, which meant Lago needed to be realistic enough for audiences to accept, yet somehow wrong, a place where evil had taken root. The fact that Lago consisted of complete 3-dimensional structures rather than facades reflects Bumstead's approach. He wasn't just creating backgrounds, but building environments where the story could breathe. Fact number 15. John Wayne absolutely hated this movie. Now we come to one of the most famous pieces of High Plains Drifter trivia, and the full story is even better than most people know. John Wayne represented an older vision of the Western and believed in heroes who were clearly heroic, in settlers who were fundamentally decent, in an American frontier that reflected American values. He once said he hated movies with bad sheriffs and townspeople. When Wayne saw High Plains Drifter, it appalled him. He wrote Eastwood a letter that included this critique, saying that isn't what the West was all about, that isn't the American people who settled this country. The clash went deeper than one film. Wayne's son Michael was trying to get his father to collaborate with Eastwood on a project called The Hostiles, and he tried multiple times to get Wayne to read the script. During one sailing trip, Michael attempted again, and Wayne reportedly said this piece of shut again and threw the script overboard into the ocean. The collaboration never happened. Eastwood addressed Wayne's criticism in a 1992 interview with the Los Angeles Times, saying he realized that there's 2 different generations, and Wayne wouldn't understand what he was doing because High Plains Drifter was meant to be a fable, not meant to show the hours of pioneering drudgery or be anything about settling the West. Biographer Scott Iman offered what might be the most insightful analysis, noting that Wayne was sensitive about the drift toward nihilism and probably felt a little threatened. Two visions of the Western, two visions of America, they could never be reconciled. Fact number 16. The film was completed under budget and ahead of schedule. Here's something that became a hallmark of Eastwood's directorial career, and it started with High Plains Drifter. 2 days ahead of schedule and under its $5,500,000 budget is how the production finished. This efficiency wasn't accidental. Eastwood approached filmmaking with minimal fuss and maximum focus, knowing what he wanted, communicating it clearly, and refusing to waste time or money on unnecessary takes or elaborate setups. $15,700,000 at the domestic box office alone tells you how audiences responded. Against that $5.5 million budget, the film returned nearly 3 times its investment. Among all westerns released in the 1970s, High Plains Drifter ranked 6th in earnings and came in 20th among all films released in 1973. For a dark, violent, morally ambiguous supernatural western, those numbers are extraordinary. Eastwood proved something with High Plains Drifter that would define his subsequent career, namely that you could make uncompromising films efficiently, and audiences would respond. Fact number 17. The entire film was shot in sequence. Here's a production detail that most audiences would never notice, but that significantly affected the finished film. Hollywood movies are almost never shot in sequence because it's more efficient to film all scenes at a particular location together, regardless of where they fall in the script. Sets get built, used for everything they're needed for, and torn down, and actors might film their final scene in the first week of production. High Plains Drifter took a different approach. Eastwood shot the entire movie in sequence, from beginning to end. Shooting this way is unusual because it's generally more expensive and logistically complicated, but it offers significant advantages for performance. Actors can build their characters progressively, and the emotional journey happens in real time. The town's transformation from normal settlement to painted hellscape unfolds naturally over the course of production. For a film so dependent on atmosphere and mood, shooting in sequence made sense. Cast and crew experienced Lago's moral deterioration alongside the fictional townspeople, and by the time they reached the climax, everyone had lived through the story together. Fact number 18. The town set no longer exists. You cannot visit Lago today because the town set was destroyed as part of the film's production. Remember that the climax of High Plains Drifter involves the stranger burning Lago to the ground. That wasn't accomplished with miniatures or special effects because they actually set fire to the buildings they had spent 18 days constructing. 150,000 feet of timber, 14 houses, a hotel, a church, and 18 days of 10-hour shifts by 50-plus workers all burned for the cameras. This commitment to practical filmmaking is something you rarely see today. Modern productions would likely use computer effects or controlled burns that preserve the structures, but Eastwood burned it all down because that's what the story required. If you visit the southern shores of Mono Lake today, you'll find no trace of Lago. The otherworldly landscape remains with those alien tufa formations and that alkali water, but the town that Eastwood built there exists only on film. Fact number 19. Jeffrey Lewis began a long collaboration here. Jeffrey Lewis appears in High Plains Drifter as Stacy Bridges, the lead outlaw whose return drives the plot, and this was his first of 6 films with Eastwood. Lewis would go on to appear in Thunderbolt and Lightfoot, Every Which Way But Loose, Any Which Way You Can, Bronco Billy, and Pink Cadillac. He became one of Eastwood's most reliable character actors, the kind of performer who elevated every scene he appeared in. There's another connection worth mentioning. Jeffrey Lewis's daughter is Juliette Lewis, who would become a major star in her own right with performances in Cape Fear, Natural Born Killers, and countless other films. High Plains Drifter launched more than just Eastwood's directorial career in westerns. Collaborations began here, and working relationships took root that would last for decades. Fact number 20. The whip scene. Early in the film is a deliberate clue. Finally, here's a detail that rewards close attention and ties together everything we've discussed. Early in High Plains Drifter, there's a scene where the stranger flinches at the sound of a bullwhip. It's a small moment, easy to miss, but loaded with meaning. Marshal Jim Duncan was publicly whipped to death by the outlaws, while the townspeople watched and did nothing, which makes the bullwhip the instrument of his murder and the central symbol of the film's violence and the town's guilt. When the stranger, this mysterious figure who may or may not be Duncan's ghost, instinctively reacts to the sound of a whip, We're getting a clue because his body remembers what happened, and the trauma is literally embedded in his physical responses. Later in the film, the stranger uses a bullwhip to kill Cole Carlin, one of the outlaws. The instrument of Duncan's murder becomes the instrument of revenge, and the symmetry is complete. This is the kind of layered storytelling that makes High Plains Drifter worth revisiting. Every detail serves the larger design, and nothing is accidental. Once you understand what Eastwood was building, you see connections everywhere. There you have it. 20 hidden facts about High Plains Drifter that reveal the depth and craftsmanship behind this film. What started as a 9-page treatment inspired by a real-world murder became Clint Eastwood's statement of purpose as a director. He removed the easy explanations, cast his own stunt double as the murder victim, built an entire town in 18 days just to burn it down, and created a Western that John Wayne despised precisely because it challenged everything Wayne believed about the genre. The critical establishment has caught up with Eastwood's vision. A 94% score on Rotten Tomatoes now greets High Plains Drifter, and film scholars identify it as the beginning of themes Eastwood would explore throughout his career. What seemed shocking in 1973 now looks like a landmark in American filmmaking. But what stands out most about High Plains Drifter is that its central mystery remains unsolved. Eastwood deliberately left it ambiguous. Foreign dubs tell us the stranger is Duncan's brother, while the English version suggests he might be Duncan's ghost. Eastwood himself said he wanted audiences to draw their own conclusions. That ambiguity is the film's greatest strength. More than 50 years later, we're still debating, still rewatching, still noticing details we missed before. The stranger rode out of a heat mirage at the beginning of High Plains Drifter, and he vanished back into one at the end. Where he came from and where he went remain mysteries, and some mysteries are better left unsolved. If you grew up watching this film, I hope these 20 facts have given you new reasons to revisit it. If you've never seen it, there's never been a better time to discover what Eastwood accomplished at Mono Lake in 1972. Thanks for watching. Until next time.